I will say absolutely now, definitively, that this is an agenda. This is not a natural crisis. This is not because of Russia and Ukraine. That's part of it, but it's not. We could still fix it regardless of that. This is countries around the world placing restrictions on fertilizers, on food supplies, on cattle that should not be there, that have no place being there. And because they're doing this, they are creating, i.e., man made crisis, they are creating a global famine. They're in the works of making a global famine. Definitively, I'm saying it. Let me show you some of the agenda with this. Now, right here, this is from the Center for Public Integrity. This is 2020, before, when the writing was first on the wall that they wanted to be doing these things. Keep in mind, this was 1 year after Sri Lanka implemented these policies, and this was 1 year into the pandemic. The Center for Public Integrity said this: fertilizers are contaminating and warming the planet. They claim it's damaging the environment and creating global warming. Regulators haven't acted on decades-old warnings. And I'll go a bit deeper. As it says further in, the agricultural alchemy comes with a toll, talking about the efficiency of modern farming. In America's Corn Belt and around the world, some of the fertilizer applied to fields escapes the soil in forms that contaminate and warm the planet. They claim it's a global warming threat. They say some of these compounds enter the atmosphere as a potent greenhouse gas, folks. Folks, first of all, a lot of the global warming stuff is absolute nonsense. I'll say definitively as well. We'll do maybe more episodes on that to really explain how. But of course, CO2 and carbon dioxide, you breathe out carbon dioxide, it actually benefits plants. But they're saying that these fertilizers are causing this type of damage. And they're saying it's fueling climate problems as well, like flooding and so on, because they're blaming flooding on global warming and other things like this. They're also saying that in agricultural areas that basically contaminated water wells from nitrates are exceeding health limits. And this is important because when they talk about exceeding health limits, that's because the European Commission has placed restrictions and regulations on the amounts of nitrates in the water supply, which is one of the excuses they're using to create policy to restrict nitrates, i.e. fertilizers, and cows. Now, this is another report. This is from 2021, last year. This is from Our World in Data. And it says here, can we reduce fertilizer use without sacrificing food production? And the interesting thing here is they're arguing that, yes, you can reduce fertilizer use without starving the whole world. They say some countries need more fertilizers to increase crop yields, but some could cut back without sacrificing food production. Interestingly here, they're making the same point that Michael Yon was saying, basically, that, Michael Yon, what they're saying here is that some countries are more efficient with farming. Typically poorer countries with less efficient farming tend to use more of these products they say are harmful, whereas the more efficient countries tend to do things, again, more efficiently, and it's not as big of a crisis. The problem is that you're creating restrictions in these, very efficient countries, which is making it, ironically, so that less efficient farming practices will very likely need to come about, ironically toppling the narrative that this story is trying to make. Let me show you some other stuff. So this is the agenda, right? It's about reducing nitrates in water, which is one of the ways they're creating these policies, because they say the fertilizers and so on are affecting the water supplies, the cows or whatever affecting the water supplies, because they want to cut back on nitrates and ammonia and all these other things. And they're also saying that it's causing CO2 emissions, which they claim is the cause of what they say is global warming. Now, countries are using this to create restrictions. We talked a lot about Europe. Let me show you Canada. This is from the website of the Government of Canada. It says, government seeks guidance on path towards reducing emissions associated with fertilizer. And if you read into it, it has a very clear note on here of the intent of implementing the same types of policies we see happening in the Netherlands. The same types of policies we see in many parts of the world. I'm going to show you a few other examples of this. Let me show you another link. This is the Parliament of Canada. Petition to the Government of Canada. And this is officials in Canada arguing that these policies they're trying to create are going to damage the farmers. Almost identical in policy to what's happening in the Netherlands right now. It says the Government of Canada has not ruled out limiting the amount of fertilizer that Canadian farmers can use in order to meet their national emissions reduction target of 30% below 2020 levels from fertilizer. Now remember, that 30% target for reduction that they're saying they want to push in Canada, that's the same target of reduction that they're trying to push right now in the Netherlands, 30%. Now, if you get into the weeds of it, they actually say 30% to 70%. But on paper, in terms of what they're saying most directly publicly, let's see if we read the whole reports, they're saying 30%. So what you see happening in the Netherlands, they're trying to do right now in Canada, almost by the book to the T. And it continues on here. It says, we, the undersigned citizens of Canada, call upon the Government of Canada to work with farmers, provinces, and the agricultural sector to ensure any plan to reduce agricultural emissions does not restrict or financially discourage the amount of fertilizer that Canadian farmers use and does not limit Canada's ability to maximize food production. Now, of course, the governments, as they are saying in many other countries right now, as they're saying in Sri Lanka before the crisis, as they're saying right now in Germany, as they're saying right now in the Netherlands, the governments are saying, because these public policy organizations, it's like Davos and so on, are saying, hey, there's no problem. Go ahead and do it. There's enough buffer room. You can get rid of the farmers. It's not going to kill everyone, we swear, right? They keep saying that kind of stuff, and then what happens? You end up in a Sri Lanka situation where, yes, people are facing mass starvation. Let me show you this. This is New Zealand. The exact same thing. Stuff.co.nz. This is in 2018, folks. This is in 2018, 1 year before Sri Lanka's policy, 1 year before the pandemic, right? It says New Zealand, banning New Zealand's hidden climate killer, synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. And it says, we need to be farming far fewer cows. That much is obvious to anyone who isn't living in the fantasy world of unproven methane vaccines. But reducing, they're calling these vaccines, right? But reducing the herd won't be enough. There's a hidden climate and river killer that drives the industrialization of agriculture. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. We have to ban it. This is also New Zealand. Fed News in May 2022, just recently. They're saying the call for a nitrogen fertilizer ban has been rejected, at least temporarily. This is still in the process there, but the government there people are fighting back against it. It says any decision, and they just made this decision just very recently. They tried doing it there. It just in May, just again a couple months ago, got blocked. But it's not off the table. It says any decision on changes to the current cap on synthetic nitrogen fertilizer should wait until the review scheduled in 2023. A majority in Parliament's Environmental Select Committee says. The committee was considering a petition from Steve Abel on behalf of Greenpeace, which called for staged reductions in use on synthetic nitrogen fertilizer, leading to a full ban on its sale. Almost exactly what they did in Sri Lanka. Not on its sale, its production, and its importation by 2024. They tried doing the same thing in Sri Lanka, and it's still on the table. Next year, they're going to make the decision on whether they do it or not. This is another one. This is the Welsh, right? It says here in Wales, Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, and this is 2021. It says, our letter to Welsh government on nitrate vulnerable zones. This is in Wales, folks. GWCT Wales are disappointed with the Welsh government's announcement that the whole of Wales will be made into a nitrate vulnerable zone. We were hoping that the Welsh government would come back with a more effective and tailored solution to the agri-pollution problems we face in Wales, one that works with farmers and makes a real difference in solving the problems. You see the pattern here, folks? Same policies, same narratives, different countries. And nobody's pointing to the big picture. Let me show you more. This is Germany. The limited times, Germany. Agricultural land contamination with nitrate. Cabinet approves new guidelines for farmers. This is Germany. The nitrate levels in groundwater in Germany are too high, and Germany is lagging behind in implementing the relevant EU requirements, European Union. In the struggle with the Commission in Brussels about stronger protection, the federal cabinet has now approved new guidelines for nitrate pollution areas, i.e. nitrate fertilizers. The federal government announced that the new regulation would change a procedure that the Commission had objected to in designating red areas in which stricter fertilizer regulations apply. Now, again, it appears that's coming from the European Commission, that big push. And on top of that, do you remember this from 2018, right? 1 year prior to Sri Lanka, lining up with what's happened in a lot of other countries. In other words, timing coincides, policy coincides, narrative coincides. It's all the same across most areas of the world. This is 2018, also in Germany. DW says this. EU top court, European Union top court, Germany failed to curb nitrate levels in groundwater. The EU's top court has found Germany guilty of failing to combat high levels of nitrate in groundwater. The ruling means that the European Commission has the option to propose fines against Germany. Now on this, we're looking at the big picture, right? I'm showing you all the big picture here. The impact of all this is already being felt. This isn't like a far-off crisis. This is a crisis that is already beginning. This is a crisis we're already starting to feel. This is Pointer. Let me show you this. Pointer says the world food supply is at risk due to a global fertilizer shortage. Now, what happens when you restrict the importation, the manufacturing, the use of fertilizer? You might have a shortage. And they're saying now the world food supply is at risk due to a global fertilizer shortage. It says this plus manure is on high demand. They want to move to organic. There's not enough of it. You can't just go from A to B without having a middle, or A to Z without going through the whole process of transitioning. You can't just ban it and expect there to be enough product to fill the entire global need for something you just, again, created a global need for.